Greetings, I'm Linda Lanier, Assistant Professor of Counseling at Cuyahoga Community College and a former Project Manager for Student Support Services and Educational Talent Search. My module is on Educational Talent Search. The Talent Search Project is a federally funded grant program authorized as part of the reauthorization of the Higher Education Act of 1965. The Talent Search Program, also known as Educational Talent Search, is one of the federal TRIO programs under the supervision of the Department of Education. On your screen is the hierarchy of the program policies and procedures. The law, which is the legislation, is the highest rule of authority. The first level of authority is your institutional policies. When completing a talent search budget or record keeping, the institutional policies are fully implemented for project purposes, except in instances where the policy may conflict with required services or mandates of the grant project or what was submitted in the approved budget for the project. Your hiring, staffing, benefits, budget, travel policy, collective bargaining agreements, performance review, and evaluations are in line with all institutional policies. After the institutional policies, the Department of Education policies, your approved grant proposal is your plan of operation. Once you are approved or your grant proposal is approved, that is the next level of accountability. The project is approved based on information stated in the grant. Unless approved by the department secretary, the project budget is awarded to serve a designated number of participants and a targeted population. The minimum grant approval for talent search is 500, and 2/3 of those participants must be low income and potential first-generation college students. The Talent Search Program has 3 goals, and the program regulations are part of Title 34, Part 643, Subpart A of your Edgar. Talent Search Program provides grants for projects to identify qualified youth with potential for education at the post-secondary level and encourage them to complete secondary school and undertake a program of secondary education. Second, they are to publicize the availability of and facilitate the application of student financial assistance for persons who seek post-secondary education. And third, encourage persons who have not completed education programs at the secondary or post-secondary level to enter or re-enter and complete these programs. Talent search projects, therefore, seek to make sure students attend post-secondary colleges, publicize the availability of financial assistance to attend colleges, and third, encourage students who are dropouts at the secondary or high school level or dropouts of the college level. Definitions. In addition to the definitions listed in the Regulation 643.7, the legislation and regulation, the project staff must also understand if, and, or, must, may, connect, and assist, as these words are used regularly in department communications regarding services provided and allowable and unallowable cost. If is conditional, and means you must, or provides conditions, must is required, may is not required, connect means to connect, not necessarily to provide, and assist means to assist, not necessarily to complete. Required services of the Talent Search Program include connecting participants to tutoring, academic advising and secondary course selection, assisting in preparation for college entrance exams, completion of financial aid forms or the FAFSA, secondary school reentry, entry into GED or post-secondary education, connection to financial counseling and literacy. Required services are services that are mandated, and each project must provide these services. These services are not necessarily provided to all participants, but they must be provided to some participants. And we'll discuss that when we talk about who the project serves. Allowable services. Allowable services are services that a project may offer to its participants. Those services are academic tutoring, instruction and reading, study skills, mathematics, science, personal and career counseling, information and activities related to career options, exposures to campuses, workshops, and counseling for participants and participants' families, mentoring programs for elementary and secondary teachers, counselors, and faculty members at the secondary level and post-secondary level, programs and activities designed for limited English proficient, traditionally underrepresented in post-secondary education individuals with disabilities, homeless children, and foster care youth. Edgar is the Education Department General Administrative Regulations. It is where project professionals will find direction and guidance with regard to what is the Talent Search Program, who is eligible to receive the grant, who is eligible participants to participate in the grant, allowable costs, unallowable costs, services required, the grant period, and all of the regulations that they must abide by. Eligibility. Who can Talent Search serve? Number one is a citizen of the United States, permanent resident of the United States, a student who has completed 5 years of elementary education or is at least 11 years of age, but not more than 27, persons who are enrolled or has dropped out of any grade from grades 6 through 12 or has graduated from secondary school or has dropped out of post-secondary program, and a veteran. Number four, a person who is enrolled or has dropped out of any grade. The Talent Search Program is also a reentry program, reentry into high school or reentry into college. So that's post-secondary and secondary. Also, it would be noted that Talent Search will serve someone up to 27 if there is not a educational opportunity center in the area. Allowable and unallowable expenditures for the Talent Search Program. And that's in Reg 643.30 and 31. Unallowable. Stipends and other forms of direct financial support. Financial aid application fees. Research not directly related to project, evaluation and improvement, and construction. Under unallowable, B, financial aid application. The FAFSA is the primary vehicle for students to receive aid, and it is called the free application for federal student aid. And so those costs associated with applying are not paid under the grant. Number D, construction and renovation. The project does not pay for any construction or renovation of facilities that the project is located in. Next is allowable. Allowable transportation for meals, lodging for, and that's an important definition, for college visits, college days, institutions not attended by participants for transportation. Career-related trips, testing materials, college application fees, if no waiver is available, and it's paid to a third party for the participant. Continued allowable cost. In-service training for project staff, rental space if space is not available at grantee institution. And rental space is not owned by grantee. The grantee cannot pay itself rent. It cannot charge rent if it's an institution that has space for the use of the space for a talent search project. Computer hardware, software, purchase or lease. It also will pay for tuition costs, which is part of a rigorous secondary program if no similar course is offered at the participant school or district. The Department of Education Secretary approves of taking the course. It is taken through an accredited institution of higher education, comparable content and rigor to courses that are part of a rigorous secondary school program of study. The course must meet requirement for obtaining a high school diploma. Tuition is paid with talent search funds to institution for participant. So the paid tuition must go to the institution and not the participant. Not more than 2 courses per school year. So the student can take 2 courses per academic year. Talent search budget practices. Each grant should have an institutional grant accountant. It should have its submitted grant budget. It should have its approved grant budget. The submitted grant budget may have indicated more funds or more students to be served, but the approved grant budget is the one that the project will operate under, as it will have the amount of funds allocated for that number of students. Approved grant budget will tell you the number to serve. You have already put in there the staff and the salary. A note, the project should have a full-time director. It should also have a plan of operation which outlines your programs and your services. It will have your indirect cost. It will also itemize if there are any partnerships, identified institutional resources, and equipment. Indirect cost is the cost that the institution can charge as a part of operating the grant. It is limited, and if it is outside of the limited amount, it must be justified and submitted with the grant proposal. Partnerships may be identified if the project is undertaking a partnership with a tutoring resource or any outside resource. It is at this point that it needs to be identified that another service provider in partnership will be providing tutoring. If the institution has decided to provide resources, and those resources can vary from not just space, but also provision of some of the resources that may be housed at the institution, career planning, or those resources may be identified as well. And of course, equipment. Documenting program activity costs. When planning programs or services, the activity budget should identify the regulation requirement. An example of that would be to put 6.43.4A13 tutoring. To connect students to tutoring is a required service. So as the budget for your tutoring is being developed, it should identify the regulation requirement. Number 2, it should provide a allotted amount in the plan of operation. Your budget that was submitted should have had an amount designated for that activity. Provide detailed and itemization of costs related to activity or service. That would include your staff and service hours as documented by a time and effort form, any software required, any hardware required, testing material, curriculum, items such as calculators, rental space, of course, if you have to provide tutoring at an off-site location, the number of participants anticipated for the service, and any evaluation or assessments. If you're using pre and post assessments, you may want to include that as part of the budget. It also will indicate outcomes of the tutoring and the service provided. And 3, maintain records of all costs related to the program or activity. Talent search must also document participant expenses. So when planning participant-related expense, identify regulation again requirement 643.4B and 4, college campus visit. The project should provide a detailed itinerary, the campus location and the time. What time you leave and what time you will return will impact whether or not the participant is given breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Therefore, you will need a sign-in sheet for each visit, and you will need a received form if student has lunch, breakfast, or dinner paid out of the project budget. The individual signed form for each meal provided with the itinerary information. Number 2, each instance of participant services or activities are recorded via a sign-in sheet, a swipe card, or a PIN number. Provide regulation for activity, expense, and allowability. A note is on 2, students may have, if they're using a software program, they may have a PIN number directly related to your department. You want to make sure that you document that, as it is a service and it is part of an identified cost that you want to make sure you have record of. So we have moved from documenting program or project services, which are the host institution policies and procedures, through the regulations and legislations of Edgar. And now we come to the program regulations and the legislation. Documenting of participant services is one of the regulatory requirements that all projects must undertake. The project staff is required to provide at least 2 services to all participants. Those services are not required for all participants, but at least 2 services should be delivered. Again, connecting participants to tutoring, academic advising, assistant preparation for college, entrance exams, completion of financial aid forms, secondary school reentry, entry in GED or post-secondary education, or connection to financial counseling and literacy programs. In addition to documenting your expenses, you must document the participant progress. What is the evidence of your participant progress for talent search? Improved academic standing, and that is often evidenced by your participant's report card, an exam, an advanced placement score, an ACT or SAT score, enrollment in GED program, completion of the FAFSA is also evidence of participant progress and services offered. Post-secondary application, those students who apply to post-secondary schools, those documentations should be kept. And post-secondary enrollment, students who are enrolled in post-secondary enrollment and their advancement in those schools. Participants this must be kept in a participant file, and it should be kept on an annual basis. Talent search participants can, in fact, be part of the project from grade 6 through grade 12. So the documentation must be shown in an annual advancing manner. In summary, a successful talent search project manager is acquainted with the legislation and regulations authorizing the project goals, required services, participant eligibility, documentation of program activities, documentation of services provided, and documentation of participant progress. All documentation kept for the talent search program should be easily accessible and readily available for any audit or review. A participant should have a file. The file should indicate services provided and participant progress. Thank you. If you have any questions or would like to review, you can also contact our campus, Nichelle Knox, with any questions.